Okay, like Mike said, we have the privilege of hearing from Mr. Joseph Grenny. He received his BA in International Studies, and since then, he has become a best-selling author, being on the New York Times best-selling list. He's a successful businessman. He is a successful keynote speaker. And also, I think it's good to mention he's a father. His wife, Celia, is here with us tonight, and he's a father of 6. So without further ado, please welcome Joseph Grenny.
Well, good evening. Are you sure? Well, this is kind of weird for me tonight because they asked me to talk about building our company. I don't usually talk about building our company. I just go out and teach what we teach. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of both. I hope share a couple of things that are useful to you, but I'm going to ask you to do a little bit more active involvement than you might usually expect. So look to your left and right and decide who's the smartest person adjacent to you, and don't pair up with them. So pair up with somebody less smart than you. Go ahead. Get a buddy. All right. If you got a buddy, I'm going to have you do something in just a moment. But first, let me just give you a little background. I'm going to talk about, I want you to experience what we do first as a company at Vital Smarts. And then we'll talk about at least my reflections on how we did it. I never considered myself an entrepreneur. I thought of myself as just being fascinated by the problems our company was trying to solve. And our company grew and grew nicely, and I have some ideas about why we did that, but I haven't done this 10 times. There are probably people that are a lot more qualified to tell you because they did this company and sold it for $1 billion, and this one and sold it for $1 billion, and so I'll tell you our story, and I hope that's useful to you. But what I want to give you a little bit of background on is what we do and why we do it. So let's begin here. One of the topics we started paying attention to was what we call crucial conversations. So 2 things I want to encourage you to write down. And these are good for a code of life. These are good for a code in business as well. One of the big insights from all of our research is this: the health of your relationships. So think about with either roommates or a loved one, with a spouse, with a girlfriend or boyfriend, doesn't matter. The health of your relationships, the health of the teams that you work in, and the health of your organizations is fundamentally a function of one simple thing: how long it takes between somebody seeing it and somebody saying it, between somebody feeling it and somebody expressing it, between somebody thinking it and somebody discussing it. The longer that takes, and you already know this, right? You've had experiences like this, relationships where somebody is thinking or feeling something for a long time and not getting it out. And it comes out in games they play. It comes out passive-aggressive. It never comes out at all, or it doesn't come out until they dump you, right? So we've all had those experiences. The same is true in the workplace. The longer it takes in the workplace for problems to get on the table, the more mischief occurs. So we started paying attention to that. We weren't interested in communication in our careers. We were interested in what causes groups or individuals to fall short of their potential. What gets in the way of the social systems we care most about achieving what they're capable of achieving. So now let's talk more personally. The principle from a personal perspective is this: all lasting happiness in life, all lasting happiness in the lives of everyone in this room is determined by your capacity for 3 things: truth, love, and connection. And in fact, I'd argue that the last one comes from the previous 2. A relationship that isn't based on truth will never be happy. A life that is about avoiding truth will never be a happy life. Our capacity for truth and love is what creates connection. And connection is what determines how happy we are in life. Now, the corollary to this is that all suffering is a consequence of the lack of one of these: a lack of truth, a lack of love, or a lack of their result, a lack of connection. So those are the big ideas. That's what started to emerge for us as we were studying relationships, studying teams, studying organizations, and trying to understand them. And you start seeing dynamics like this. So here's your chance to play a little bit. So turn to your buddy and decide who's person 1 and who's person 2. Pick a 1 and a 2 real fast. All right? Person one, raise your hand. Person one. Person one. All right, person one, you are the husband slash son. Husband and son. Husband and son, okay? Okay, person two, raise your hand. Okay, person two, you're the mom. Hey, you're the mom. Okay, so here's the deal. Those of you who are the husband slash son, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Husband slash son. Okay, here's the deal. So your mom is visiting from out of town. And your wife agreed to make a very special meal this night for your mom. And so she's in the kitchen preparing the meal, and your mom walks in and stands behind your wife and makes a statement. So those of you who are the mom, raise your hand, moms. I'm going to flash up on the screen here the statement that you're about to say. You turn to your son and say the statement, and then son, you answer. Okay, you answer. Here you go. All right, go. Sons, what are you going to say? All right. Okay, very good, very good. Let me get you back together. So we started paying attention to moments of emotional risk like this, right? Started paying attention to those moments because we found that how people behave in that moment, how you respond in that moment with mom, decides whether or not you can sustain relationships of trust and connection. Those are more at risk in these moments than almost any other. Moments of heightened emotion, heightened anxiety, heightened politics, and so on. So here's what it can look like. This is Tucker Blanford, actual person. He's looking very happy, as you can see when this photograph is taken. He's happy in this moment because while 23 years old, he's engaged. He's engaged to the lovely Alex Lanchester. Now, the problem is shortly after this photograph is taken and he's super happy and telling all his friends he's engaged, he starts having second thoughts. He starts thinking, maybe she's not the one, Maybe this isn't the real deal. Now, remember the principle. The health of relationships, teams, and organizations is about what? It's about lag time, right? How long it takes between when you're feeling it and when you express it. So Tucker decided not to express it. And the principle here is if you don't talk it out, you act it out. If you don't talk it out, you act it out. It comes out in game playing. It comes out in avoidance. It comes out in sarcasm. So what does Tucker do? Rather than talking to Alex and saying, I don't know, let's back off here a bit, here's what he does. He calls his girlfriend, he calls Alex, and pretends that he is his own father. He says, Alex, this is Tucker's dad. There's no easy way to say this. I'm sorry to say Tucker is dead. He threw himself in front of a car. How many of you have ever faked your own death rather than break up with somebody? Have you ever done that before? Yeah, we all have at one point or another, haven't we? Look at the lengths we go to avoid having a conversation like this. Now, imagine if that's what we do with a girlfriend or boyfriend, what would happen in the workplace? What would happen if lives actually depended on it? So we were looking in organizations to try to find this. That was our curiosity. We wondered, are there moments of what you could call disproportionate influence? Moments where how people show up disproportionately affects the quality of the relationship, productivity, safety, customer retention. So as we were doing this, the patterns started to emerge, and I found myself sharing some of our research around the world. Our business was growing at the time, and we'll come to that story a little bit later. But at one point, I had the opportunity to share some of our research alongside this woman. Does anyone recognize her? No? Okay. Does anyone recognize this woman? Yeah, good. Judi Dench. Judi Dench has been in many, many movies over the years, but a recurring role is in a series of movies called what? James Bond, right? And what's the character she plays? M. Very good. You're culturally literate. I like this. So here's a fun fact for you. She actually patterned her character after this woman. This is Dame Stella Remington. She was the first female head of MI5, the Domestic Intelligence Services in the UK. So she was in a very important role, their equivalent of the FBI, right? And she was there at a time of great moment in the history of the UK, the modern history. Lots of different events happening, but also was the first female head of a very male agency. And so at this conference where I was about to share my research, she's talking about her reflections from being in this position. And after her leadership lecture, I got up to share my research. Afterwards, I sat down next to her for lunch. And she leaned over to me kind of conspiratorially, and she said, you know, when you talk about these moments, she said, I had many in my career. Well, I was fascinated. I thought, I mean, this is James Bond's boss, right? And so I said, well, do any come to mind in particular? She says, yeah. She said, there was one in particular that I've reflected on long after my retirement. I said, please tell me. She said, there had been a bombing, an IRA bombing the day before. She said, and so as was the custom, I would have a security briefing with the then head of state, who was Lady Thatcher at the time. She said, so I was in Lady Thatcher's office, waiting for her to arrive. She was about 35 minutes late. When she finally arrived, she walked in, stood opposite me, stared at the wall for a moment, sat down, straightened her skirt, and said, so what about this business with the bombing? She said, Lady Thatcher, rather than making eye contact with me, looked at this place up over my shoulder, and she started then to brief me. She started to tell me what she thought happened, what the implications were, potential policy responses, consequences of those, and got significant points wrong. She said after 30 minutes, without once waiting for the head of her intelligence services to give her perspective, Lady Thatcher stood up, straightened her skirt, pivoted, and started to walk out of the room. Now, what would you want the head of the FBI to do in this moment? What would you want her to do? Yeah, wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you hope that what she'd say is, wait a minute, there's some information. Wouldn't you hope that would happen? Now, let me ask you a hypothetical question. How many of you think it's possible for the head of state of a country to make stupid foreign policy decisions that end up ruining and wasting lives? Do you think that could happen? Yeah, have you been alive in the United States? Right? Yeah, it absolutely happens. And the question you ought to be asking as citizens of this country is, how? How does that happen? Well, it happens in moments like this. It happens when moments where the person with the information is sitting across from the person in the power and trying to decide, do I speak up or not? And so I asked Lady Dame Stella, I said, what did you do? She said, I let her walk away because she had already made up her mind. My friends, if in companies where you work people do that, you lose. It costs. Let's take a look at how. So back with your partner, person one again, raise your hand. Person one, you were the son before, right? This time you're going to be Dr. Scott. You're the guy in the white lab coat on the right here. Person two, raise your hand. Person two. Okay, person two, you're going to be Nurse Bonnie. You're the woman in the left up here. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to play a little scene out. These are your avatars for just a moment. You're going to watch them act out your life. And as soon as the video stops, about 34 seconds into it, you go back into your body and continue the conversation. So those of you who are Nurse Bonnie, person two, raise your hand, person two. Those of you who are Nurse Bonnie, as soon as the video stops, what I want you to do is turn to Dr. Scott and say the next thing you would say if you were her. Here it goes.
Can I get you to check in on Mr. Gonzalez before you take off? He's the older gentleman who had the punctured lung. We're hoping to release him.
I can't. I got to get to my son's music assembly. Just, I don't know, just tell him something came up and I'll come back tonight and check on him.
Actually, his family's all here expecting to take him home. I told him you were just down the hall. Please, it'll only take a minute.
You told him what?
I assumed it would be okay. I thought you'd be right in.
Oh, you thought? And where did you learn to think? Certainly not some 2-year rinky-dink nursing school, that's for sure.
What do you say next? All right. Okay, good. Now, if we had time, it'd be fun to hear how people responded, but let me just ask for one broad pattern. How many of you started with the phrase, up yours? How many of you began there? Just a couple, yeah, no. Now, how many of you didn't say that but thought something like that? How many of us were there? Yeah, so these are tough moments. But remember, our research was not about, are there tough moments we face? Our research was about moments of disproportionate influence. So let me ask you the thought experiment here. How many of you think that how this plays out could decide whether or not that nurse quits her job or not? How many of you think that could make a difference? Yeah. In fact, the number one reason nurses quit their jobs is when they feel disrespected, disenfranchised. This is a huge moment. Second, how many of you think that how this plays out could affect patient safety? Do you think it could? Yeah. Let me tell you a scary statistic, because we've done this research. We wondered, if you're in an operating room and the doctor does something that could hurt you, potentially kill you as a patient, makes a mistake, and a nurse who's assisting the doctor sees the mistake but has been treated like that before, what do you think the odds are that that nurse is going to push the point? What do you think? Yeah, about 1 in 40. 1 in 40. There's a 39 out of 40 chance that you're going to die rather than her risking that conversation. That's what's going to happen. So it affects patient safety. How many of you think this is probably going to affect how the entire team feels about that doctor? Do you think? Yeah, it gets passed around. How many of you think this could come back to bite the doctor later? Do you think it could? Yeah. What goes around comes around, right? And so she's going to probably be undermining him, bad-mouthing him, not cooperating with him. So this has enormous effects. We were looking for these moments of disproportionate influence, and we started to find there are moments exactly like this. Now, as the research continued, a very important science project got finished by my then 10-year-old son. So my son Samuel came to me and said, I got to come up with a project for science fair. And I said, what do you have in mind? He said, I think I want to look at how little kids deal with crucial conversations. And I said, you clever young man. I said, so what's your idea? He says, I want to put them in an uncomfortable situation and then see if the little kids will be honest about their opinion. And at first I kind of discouraged him because I said, I don't know, Samuel. I said, little kids are a lot more blunt than we start to be as we get older. And he goes, no, Dad. He goes, I know what I want to do. He says, just help me with the experiment. So I want to show you what he did, and then we'll talk about its implications for us.
We all know adults stink at talking about tough things. But how about little kids? Here's my experiment. Feed kids wretched brownies, then see if they'll tell you the truth, especially when they think it might hurt your feelings. First, I made the brownies. Lots of chocolate, eggs and flour, but instead of sugar, I put in salt. Lots of salt. There's no way they could like these better. Now I recruit kids of various ages for a taste test. I tell them I want to compare ordinary brownies to my special brownies. My dear grandmother's special recipe. My dear dead grandmother's special recipe. Then I give them $1 for being such a big help. My parents always taught me that if you want someone to like you, give them money. Okay, here goes. First, they ate the yummy sugar brownies. Next, they eat the salt bricks. Watch this girl. She can hardly keep from gagging. And now for the crucial moment. Will they tell me the truth and possibly offend me? I asked them to point to the brownies they like best. No surprise that some tried to spare my feelings. But watch, even the one who gagged? And how about really little kids? But do you want to know what they really thought? Here, guys, I have leftovers. Does anybody want seconds?
Isn't that amazing? I was stunned, just mind-blowing. And, different than you when I watched that. And for my wife and I, we have a different experience because all those little subject kids are neighbor kids, so we know them, right? So that little girl whose face puckered up when she ate the brownie, her name is Hannah. She lived right next door to us, and she is one of the most blunt, honest, outspoken little kids in the world. But she's lying about the brownies. And so the question is, have you ever been in that meeting? Have you been in that meeting before where everybody knew that the brownies suck? But when you ask them what they think, they're sugarcoating it, putting smiley faces on it, perfuming it, right? Oh, well, they're not my favorite, but maybe it's a niche market. Maybe South America would like these, but not North America. I don't know, never been. So the question, though, is, what is the cost of that? What we started to notice in our research is that at a remarkably young age, you and I start to draw a damnable conclusion. At about age 4 years old, you and I start to conclude that you frequently have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend. And that belief corrupts the rest of our lives. The belief that you can't have both truth and love. That you have to trade them off against each other. If you're going to be more truthful, you'll probably have fewer relationships. If you want better relationships, you have to just tell white lies sometimes. That's how you have to do it. That belief, the belief that you can't have both, is what causes almost all the mischief in our personal relationships, in our companies, in our marriages, in our families. So that's why we started paying attention to this. We started wondering, are there ways to tell the truth and keep friends? In fact, is it possible that the only way to have enduring intimacy is through the truth, not around it? And if so, how do you do that? Archimedes said if you had long levers, you could move planets. And that's what we went in search of. And here's what we found. We found that the moments you need to focus on the most, the ones that will affect the strength and durability of all the personal relationships in your life and of the company you may hope to start someday, are ones where three conditions come together. We're talking about something that's really important to me, high stakes. Second, I expect you to disagree with me. When it's really important to me and I expect you to disagree, I start showing up differently. And finally, there's a presence of strong emotions. These aren't just intellectual disagreements. These become emotional, visceral issues. So that's where our research focused. So what is Vital Smarts? Vital Smarts is about applied social science. We're interested in why you do what you do and how to help you change that in order to change results. And this is at the heart of that. What are the behaviors that matter the most? What are the ones which, if you change them, you'll see the greatest effect? We've done this research in small startups. And it turns out there are a handful of crucial conversations which, if you, in a startup someday, don't help people learn to close the gap in fast, talk about quickly, all the mischief happens. For example, boundary issues. That's my job, not yours. Small companies, fast growth, boundary issues come up all the time. And if they don't get talked out, they get acted out. They get politicked through. They get fought through. People quit, leave. People sideline others, and so on. Competence issues. Inevitably, as a company grows, it grows beyond the competence of people. And if you can't talk about that very quickly, you won't address it very quickly. Culture issues. Having new people come in and explaining that's not how it works here. Capital issues. We should spend on this, not that. We disagree. And if we don't come to consensus and talk openly and candidly, we don't leverage our best thoughts. Growth issues. Change issues. Failure issues. All of these, high stakes, strong emotion, opposing opinions. If you're thinking about entrepreneurship, the number one predictor of whether or not you leverage the opportunity well will be creating a culture where these kinds of issues can be addressed. So that's the background. That's the sort of what do we do. They're going to force me now to talk about how we did it, and I'm going to try to share some of my musings on that. But here's a little intro to the Vital Smarts story. Summer of 1990.
We didn't have a hotel room, we didn't have anything.
So we met in Ron's Vanagon.
So this car is still mostly new, and inside you got Ron, Carrie, Joseph, and Al.
Turned the front seats facing the back
And laid out a dream of what we wanted to do.
we had a similar vision.
Help change the world for good.
How do we make the world a better place?
And that's why they're in this car, to find a way to change the world through every individual learning to be their best self.
So much in behavior sciences has focused on what's wrong with people. We've kind of gone a different route. We've looked for positive deviance, not negative deviance.
We wanted to make it research-based, very pragmatic.
Maybe we could capture examples of good leadership if we just knew what they looked like. What do the very best leaders do that the rest of us don't? If we wanted to leverage what we were doing, we would need to train other people to do what we did.
Who are the people who can influence profound, sustainable change?
You don't have to influence everyone.
By influencing influencers, we can have an impact far bigger than our small footprint.
It's kind of like planting a seed. If the seed sprouts and it has seeds, then you can go way beyond that original idea.
So they gave that idea seed a name, Vital Smarts, and they planted it, and then
If we turned these training of skills into training products, we could write books to affect people all around the world who didn't have access to training. That our reach could be drastically improved. And now we have a full array of products that people can learn from.
You go to our certified training. You can read the book, you can listen to the tape, you can go to a webinar.
And 2.5 decades later, that little seed has grown into quite a flower. A 4 New York Times bestseller writing, 6 years running, fastest growing company in America, trainer of more than 300 of the Fortune 500 companies. Yeah, that is one kick butt awesome flower.
The reason Vital Smarts has been successful is because we're trying to solve important
That's a
problems.
little bit of a backdrop to Vital Smarts. Our mission is what you heard. We wondered when we sat in that Vanagon back in 1990, so if you do the math, you'll realize this is a get-rich-slow strategy. Really, really slow. Took 27 years to get where we are today. But we didn't care. It wasn't about get rich. It was about that. It was, could we, as a small group of people, have an outsized effect on the planet? Could just a few dozen people in Provo, Utah, affect millions of lives? We wanted to do the hard work first, so we did lots and lots of research, looking at literature, trying to find the best social science out there. We did thousands of hours of our own observation, many tens of thousands of subjects in various kinds of tests, experiments, and studies. Out of that started emerging some ideas that recurred. We translated those into books. Books for us are paid brochures. So we hope the book serves people. We hope it helps them change their lives. But from a business perspective, when you can get somebody to pay $18.95 for your brochure, that's kind of cool. Because now they're reading this and it starts to establish a rapport and a relationship with them. So 1990, we start in the Volkswagen Vanagon. 1998, and you're welcome to ask follow-up questions about this later, we had a horrible experience. We sold our company. It was an absolute nightmare. The company that bought us went bankrupt. 3 years later, we were able to purchase ourselves back from bondage and restart. 2002 was the first of our bestsellers that we published. 2004 another, 2007 another, 2011. By 2013, we'd been able to touch 1 million lives through our training, and we'll talk in a moment about that. We were acquired about 3 years ago by an organization, private equity firm called Providence Private Equity. And 2015, we're now merged with a group of other companies called 2080. So I now have a boss, and that's a new experience for me as well. But here's Vital Smarts. We have about 1,000 of the best named, best branded companies in the entire world as customers. We've worked with about 300 of the Fortune 500 companies, some very recognizable brands. And so again, that dream in that Volkswagen van really has started to come true. We have a chance to have an effect far bigger than our size. Today the number up there is about 2.1 million, so hundreds of thousands of people we've been able to have deep experiences with. 300 of the Fortune 500, close to 5 million books sold today, translated into 28 languages. Who is Vital Smarts? We're about 130 employees at our corporate campus in Provo, Utah. We have 20 partnership relationships in 37 different countries, people that represent us in different places in the world, and about 11,000 people that are out today, tomorrow, and the next day training our material in a variety of organizations. So really wonderful. It's incredibly satisfying to me to see that kind of reach. Here's the revenue story, if that's of interest to you. So started at zero in 2002 when we got things back. But since then, you see a steady growth. The part that I'll talk a little bit about later that we're the proudest of is this piece right in here. Some of you, all of you lived through that period. Some of you are probably less aware of what was happening. But that was one of the bleakest periods in our industry, in the history of our industry. And yet we grew wonderfully through it. So happy to discuss that as well. So the question is, if you're out there teaching a tired topic like communication, how can you start a company on that? But the real principle that I've come to understand is it doesn't matter if there are a million other people teaching leadership or communication or whatever, there's always room to do it better. There's always room to do it better. So I'm going to put up a product here and I want you to name the company as fast as you can. Who did that? Apple, yeah. When Apple made that, was it the first person the first company to make that kind of a device? No, there were many out there already. They came in and just kicked butt on it. They did it wonderfully. Who's that? Yeah, Apple again. Was it the first phone? Was it the first smartphone? No. Anyone recognize this brand? Ooh, nicely done. A real small brand on there. Did they invent the sock? No. But they're getting you to pay $35 for their lousy socks. That's a special class of genius or a special class of stupid on our part. I don't know which, but one or the other. One more. Ooh, nice. Yeah, did they invent the hamburger? No, they did not. So the principle for us to get is business is not about just having a better idea. It's about just doing the idea better than anybody else. And too many times I think we load up on thinking I've got to have the brand new thing, when really what it's about is execution and building the organization. So I'll share with you just very briefly. I'm going to rapid fire through some of these. Here's 7 things that I think account for what we've done. Let me give you one brag about Vital Smarts. If you saw the last number, today Vital Smarts is about a $70 million company, $70 million in revenue. We are fabulously profitable. And that's not a Joseph Grenny accomplishment. That is a team accomplishment. Out of $70 million, about $35 million of that will make it to the bottom line. This is a high margin business if you know how to do it well, but most don't. Most in our industry might put 10% on the bottom line. Vital Smarts at 50%, it leads the pack. The organization has been recognized many times for being best in class in the entire industry. And here are some of the things that were important in getting us there. So this is in fall 2008, as we got together at the end of the year to plan for 2009, this happened. Does anyone know what that line means? Yeah. This was the stock market. So it went from a high of about 13,000 in May of that year to a low of 7,500 in November of that year. Now, I don't know how much you know about our industry, but this is more terrifying for us than most anybody else. Because when companies start to tighten down, the first thing they stop spending money on is us. It's the easiest thing to cut. It takes a while before the consequences of not spending it make a difference. And so we got involved in a very dire and defensive conversation in fall of that year. We started talking about, we're a $25 million company at the time. What if next year we only do 20 million? What if it was 15 million? And then we looked at the stock market and said, man, if the Dow Jones is in half, what if we were in half? What if it's 12,500,000? What if that's all we do? Who do we let go? What jobs do we cut? How do we protect ourselves? We got in this really negative, cynical kind of spiral. And then at one moment after we did all this planning, what would happen if we dropped by 10%, 25, 50%, 75%? What would we do? We had all these exercises we'd finished. And finally, one member of the group spoke up and said, wait a minute. If when this happens, all the other companies in our industry start to pull back and stop spending on marketing and sales, the marketplace gets very quiet. It's a lot easier to be heard in a quiet marketplace. What if we went the opposite direction? What if we started investing in getting heard and getting noticed more because it's quiet from everybody else? And then the idea began to build. And then the next question somebody asked was, do we even deserve to have people spend money on us at this time? If companies' primary problem at this point is, how do we live in this really difficult financial environment? Do we contribute to that? Do we help? Well, I want to show you a little bit about what we do. This is a doctor and a juggler from Minnesota Children's Hospital. I want you to get a little sense of what we do, and then I'll share with you the principle that came out of that very important moment for us.
Children's Minnesota is one of the largest freestanding pediatric health systems in the United States and has been frequently ranked by U.S. News and World Report as a top children's hospital. As part of a continued effort to improve quality of care, Children's Minnesota looked to address one of the biggest concerns of child patients: pain.
We asked a lot of questions, but the leading question was, and we left it open-ended, in the last 24 hours, what's the single worst pain you've experienced here at the hospital? Hands down, kids said needles.
When I talk about needle pokes, we're talking about vaccinations, we're talking about drawing blood, we're talking about injections, we're talking about intravenous cannulation.
For kids, it's not about how long the procedure lasts, it's how long it takes them to recover. And what we know is every time we don't do that procedure well, the next procedure, their anxiety and their pain scores go up.
Donna and Stefan recognized how difficult it can be to change long-standing organizational practices. To address the problem, they looked to the principles found in Influencer.
And we said, pain is waste. We can do this. We can use the existing system. If we use the modalities as well in Influencer right from the get-go, we have a much, much, much higher chance of being successful.
Children's Minnesota titled the program The Comfort Promise. We will do everything possible to prevent and treat pain. They now offer the Comfort Promise to more than 200,000 children annually. It's been a tremendous success, and its influence is growing.
Where previously, if we could get a 1% increase in those satisfaction scores, everybody did the happy dance, right? And we got 10 and 12% in 2 years.
Waiting time has gone down. Our staff turnover gone down.
We have outside clinics now who are not connected with children's asking us to teach them how to do the Comfort Promise.
We are now helping 4 children's hospitals in North America, in Montreal, in Toronto, in Kansas City, and in Atlanta, to roll out a Comfort Promise in their places as well.
I really feel like this is going to be standard of care within the next 5 years. Families will expect that this is just how it's done.
By using a top-down, bottom-up strategy, we are the first children's hospital in the world who was able to pull this off. And I think that the combination of using established Toyota lean modalities together with quite groovy modalities from the Influencer is what made us successful.
Doesn't a guy with a German accent talking about needles make you nervous? I don't know about you, but he's one of the coolest guys in the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I cry when I see that video because our whole goal as an organization is to change the world. It's to touch lives, to change lives. And here we've got this brilliant MD that's taking our intellectual property and making a difference in the lives of hundreds of thousands of children by changing some behaviors in the hospital. So as we sat there in this planning exercise asking about, well, does anybody need us at these times? We started to realize, well, darn it, they do. We can contribute to the problems they're facing. If you're having to shrink your organization, if you're having to get by with less money, if you've got customers that you're trying to do a better job with, that's what we do. The question is not whether we can guarantee how 2008 goes. The question is, do we deserve for 2008 to go well? The first thing I would urge you to ask as entrepreneurs in the future is, do you deserve success? Does your mission merit a market? Do you deserve to have customers come and hand over money to you? And the question that allows you to answer that in the affirmative is whether or not you're solving big and important human problems, not trivial little junk. What Vital Smarts wants to do is help people change behavior that changes lives, that changes the world. And so we developed a determination that we were going to prove to the world that that's what we do, even better than we ever had in the past. And we grew phenomenally through 2008, 9, 10, and 11. Made an enormous difference. Second thing that we realized over time is you got to know where your money is made. Now that might sound trivial, but in our industry, most don't. Most people lose track of that. I worked for a very fine, very large organization in our training industry prior to working at Vital Smarts who had never made a profit. They'd grown like crazy but couldn't make money. When we sat in that white Volkswagen van, we all looked at each other and said, let's be clear about our business model. Our business model is photocopy a binder that costs you about $7 to photocopy, then sell it for $250. If you can't make money doing that, you're a special class of stupid. And so we tried to keep it really simple, tried to keep it really clear. We're an intellectual property company, and what we do is sell our intellectual property. That's it. If you start trying to get into 19 other businesses, you die. So really important to understand in very simple terms, what's the core of how that money comes in. Second, you got to make sure you understand what your customers care about. If you Google Vital Smarts, you'll see an enormous amount of media for how small this company is. Huge, wonderful, top brand media companies come to us constantly. We're regularly doing New York Times interviews, Los Angeles Times. We've been on the Today Show and Good Morning America. And so this little tiny Provo company gets lots of attention. We do that on purpose. We generate research to get that attention because we know who our customers are and what they care about. So the obvious customers are executives like Dr. Friedrichsdorf, who you just saw, who's trying to deal with pain issues with children at a children's hospital. Those are the executive decision makers. But there's a second customer we have to worry about. That's the HR and training buyer. They have different values sometimes. They don't care always about whether or not they're reducing pain for children in the hospital. They care about whether the training courses are popular. And so we've got to worry about that. But what we also know is that these people feel like the ugly stepchildren in most organizations. They have no credibility a lot of times. And so our job is to help them have more credibility, which is why we do that. We do research. We publish it so it differentiates us so that when they go in to talk to the executives about using our solutions, they look smart. And it's easy for them to look smart because we're empowering them with good ideas. But there's a third customer that it's easy to lose track of. And this is our volunteer sales force. You saw earlier that we have 11,000 certified trainers teaching our material around the world. They're a customer. They don't make the training purchase decision, but they're the ones that are out training the material. So we try to do things like this for them. We know that what's important to them is to feel like a hero in the classroom. And they're often busy people and don't have a lot of time to prepare. So we have to make it easy for them to prepare to train our material and get a lot of people laughing and having a good time. So we create little things like this.
So thanks for agreeing to meet with us about your storage needs. I brought a junior sales associate with me today. This is Michael.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Well, I've looked at your proposal, and I have to say, I'm very interested.
Oh, that's great. As I've had a chance to review your backup infrastructure, and I don't want to be too critical here, but your platform is from when? The Jurassic era? Oh, very good. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
So, how about we jump into our recommended solutions?
Sure. I know our tape system is a bit of a dinosaur, but...
Okay, Michael.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
We were
okay.
hoping that our
Okay.
work with you would,
Yes, Michael.
would increase the...
Mike.
So, do we have your business?
No.
Facing a crucial conversation? Vital Smarts can help.
When you got a training professional standing in a classroom trying to keep energy going, sometimes the little assets like that can be helpful. We invest a lot to try to make the training experience rich. You got to know who your customers are. And usually there's more than one in the buying process that you got to pay attention to. Next. Over the years, we were intellectual property junkies. So we would come up with a new idea practically every month. We'd develop new training and we'd go out and do it and people would tend to like it and we'd think that was the hottest new thing. And we had probably 40 or 50 training materials that we developed over the first 10 years of our company's existence. But the problem was we didn't have a real flagship. So it's important to try stuff. A while back in our house, I was in the garage. You probably had this happen before. Our garage has a funky design where it's really wide, but it has a super high ceiling that's about twice as high as the garage doors. And hummingbirds sometimes get in. One day this hummingbird got in, and I watched it float to the top, and I found dead hummingbirds in our garage enough that I knew what the future of this hummingbird was going to be like if I didn't take action. But the problem is the roof is about 35 feet up there, and so I get this long dust mop and I'm trying to bat it down, but the hummingbird keeps wanting to go up. It thinks up is out. One of the biggest problems you have in companies is the same problem that the hummingbird had. We keep thinking that up is the direction we have to go, when sometimes you have to go down to get out. Sometimes it's important to drop a little bit. And one of the most important corollaries to going out and trying stuff is then killing stuff. It's important to kill things. You'll have 10 times more ideas than you should probably put energy and effort into. Like that hummingbird, it will die if it keeps pushing up. It needs to know it has to decline. One of the most counterintuitive things you have to do as an entrepreneur occasionally is actually decline revenue. We had all of these training products that were bringing in a few thousand here, a few thousand there. And when we finally sat down and said, time to kill stuff, time to murder a baby. Now that's an ugly metaphor. Don't write that down. Don't quote me. But when you've created an intellectual property, you have that kind of affection for it. It feels like your baby. And what your partners are asking you to do is go put a bullet in it. That feels inhumane. It feels horrifying. And to an entrepreneur, the idea of saying, we're not going to sell that to clients anymore, we're not going to pay any more attention to that, it feels that sickening to you. And so, occasionally, that's what you got to do. After we got the company back in 2002, we sat around a table and said, we got 30 things that we've been doing. We need to do one. We are a little company, and we have enough management attention and capital to do one thing, if that. What will it be? And this one came up to the surface. We had a very careful and candid discussion about it. And that's why this happened. That's why when we launched it, it got packaged well. We got good endorsements. We got Stephen Covey to do a foreword. We had a little bit of a marketing campaign behind it. We bought some magic beans and hoped those would help. And then it made 1 million copies. And then it made 2 million copies. And then it meant 3 and now 4. So it grew like that because it had focus, because we killed things, because we took all of that attention and we husbanded it for one of those products. That's a tough conversation to have. And if you're not being honest with your management team or with your investors about the need to pare down your focus, you lose. 6th, fire people. One of the most important predictors of your success in a company is how quickly you fire people when you know you made a mistake. They all come in thinking they're this. Everybody that walks in, we had 5 different marketing vice presidents we fired, and every one of them had a resume that looked just like that guy. That said, I can walk on water, I can fight 1 million people at the same time, I can, get dinner done before 5 o'clock, and all of them thought that they were the superstar, when in fact most of them were actually this guy. But you don't know it until probably 6 months into when they arrived. So once you start having that creeping feeling, this one's not a fit, the question is, what's the lag time? What's the lag time between when you see it and when you say it? Between when you know this isn't the woman, this isn't the man, that's not going to work, and when you sit down with them and say goodbye. The longer it takes, the more of your resources you waste, the more you squander your opportunity. Firing is one of the most important things you do to build a company. And finally, share the wealth fairly. There are a lot of people that will tell you that what you ought to do is go do good HR research and find out what competitive salaries are and pay in the competitive range. I think that's bunk. I think that's absolute garbage. That's a recipe for selfishness and a lack of loyalty. One of the most important things we did at Vital Smarts was do that research, understand where we need to be from a salary perspective, but then step back and ask the question, who's really generating the wealth here, and are we paying them what they deserve, not what they can fight for? Are we paying them commensurate to their contribution to the organization, not what the market is forcing us to pay them? Live on a higher compensation principle than market compulsion. Don't let coercion be what it's about. or else you get in these negotiations with employees that you shouldn't have to. We started with 4 guys in a white Volkswagen van. And that's all we were by ourselves. The reason the company grew was because a whole bunch of really smart people came in. And then it grew to this. 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 It grew and grew and grew because there were smarter people than us at specific disciplines. They were world class. This is our most recent picture with about 130 employees. There are a handful of superstars that are geniuses at their discipline. And if what we had done is paid them what the market forced us to pay them, number one, shame on us. But number two, we probably would have lost them at some point. They would have proven they could do it here. They would have gone somewhere else. But they got that this was about something bigger. This was about principles of fairness and equity. So when we sold 3.5 years ago, we created a number of millionaires. And that was a terrific feeling because they deserved it. Every once in a while when we would have our quarterly bonus distributions, which by the way, every employee participated in. Afterwards, some employee from the shipping department or some employee from fulfillment or something would come to me and say, man, thank you, with tears in their eyes. They'd say, this is going to make such a big difference to our family. And I learned to acknowledge what they were saying first and to say, well, you're welcome. But I felt squeamish about your welcome because this wasn't a gift. This was something I got from the market and they got from the market. The market gave it to both of us. The market rewarded both of us because we were doing something together and we deserved to be benefited together. Yeah, there were some that made a lot more than others in the company, but even our frontline employees had the potential of making double their income based on their bonuses and profit sharing because they were world class. But the key to this is we expected them to be world class, and when they weren't, they either improved or they found their way out of the company. When you pay like that, you can expect a lot more. So, final thought. Well, these were some of the things that made a difference for us. They're tough to do. Make sure you deserve success. Know where your money is made. Know all the customers and what's important to them and satisfy all of them, not just the one writing the check. Try stuff, kill stuff, fire people, share the wealth fairly. But the most important message I want to leave is don't go out there and say, I want to make money. Don't do that. Go out and say, I want to solve problems. And then solve problems that the market likes you to solve. And then the reward comes naturally. But make it about deserving success, not just wanting success. Make it about being worthy of it. For us, we every time we have all hands meetings, we have what we call mission moments. And we share stories like this.
I was told I had 90 days. I was on probation. And I had to stop the negative behavior. Upper managers took the class first. Secondly, it was supposed to be next level managers, but my coach decided that I needed to have the class before that. So I started the class. I had realized that there were times I didn't like myself that much either after something I'd done after I'd blown up. So I thought it might have been a signal that maybe it's time for you to look at the behavior piece. I had a very rough childhood. My dad was very stern. So I had built a wall, a mental wall. You isolate yourself from hurt. So if you don't get involved with somebody, if you don't connect with them, they don't have a way of hurting you. But you don't experience a lot of the joys of life. One of the hardest things I've probably ever done in my whole life. It's not easy, but soon I realized that it was working. People treated me different. Without the frequent blow-ups, they were coming to me. I was a person they wanted to come and talk to. What I started to realize after taking the class was that a person's face had a lot to tell me if I chose to look at it. I could see if they were happy, but there were a number of times where I would see something in their face that told me I'd violated it. But I'd back up, say, I'm sorry, did I do something to upset you? That's not something I would have ever done before. I see other people respect me more so than they did before. I changed so much that my wife of 30 years no longer knew how to react to me. Not only did I like myself better, she liked me too.
Go change the world. So that's our story, and I'm happy to answer questions if you got any about the company, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you too. So.
Take questions down here, and then you can just respond.
Great.
So we're going to do what we did a few weeks ago, where we have you come down here on the side if you have any questions. So if you have any, just come down, and then he'll take those questions.
The fewer questions you ask, the sooner we get ice cream. Just mentioning that.
So why did you decide to buy the company back instead of like making a new company with the same idea? Why did you decide to go through the hustle of buying it back?
Yeah, there's a longer fun story that I wish I had time to tell you with that. But the company that purchased us had legal rights to prohibit us from approaching old clients. And so a lot of what we wanted was just freedom from potential litigation. That was a lot of what we wanted to buy. Generally, we were producing some new intellectual property after that, and so we didn't really need everything that we bought back from them, but it was just worth it to be able to sleep at night and know that lawyers weren't coming after us.
So I guess kind of a different question, but a question I have for you. When you guys were starting Vital Smarts, did you guys have any mentors? And if you did, how did you find your mentors?
Yeah, all of us had careers along the way and had people that influenced us. For me, 3 of the most important mentors were those men. So Carrie Allen Wrong, I was 10 to 15 years younger than each of them. So I was kind of the baby of the group. And I think they brought me in so that I could be their retirement strategy, and it's kind of worked out that way. But they were mentors for me. We had college professors, academics that were mentors. I think the most important answer I can give to your question was mentors have been very important to us. Having people we could reach out to and get reactions and ideas from has been really important.
First thing, what happened to the van again?
Ron McMillan, this is a tragic story. I didn't want to end on a downer. But yeah, very sad story. Ron lived at Sundance, and the Vanagon was parked underneath a roof when the ice built up from spring shed one day, and it was split in two.
Slightly more real question.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that back up.
I'm sorry. I'll try to bring it up here a little bit within follow-up. Okay, so pretty tight quarters in a Vanagon. Can you walk us through what were some of the crucial conversations had with you and your partners, especially in those early days when you didn't have a lot?
The most important crucial conversation is how do you split the money? And that was a tricky one because everyone was bringing different assets to the party. And so one of the most important agreements we made with each other, and we weren't even all about crucial conversations research at the time, but early on we decided, number one, that we would start by splitting the money 4 ways. So literally at the end of every month we'd put it in a pile, split it 4 ways, and divvy it up. But the second agreement, the only one that would make that work, is if anyone started feeling they were being ripped off, they were going to talk about it, and talk about it fast. And so that's the agreement that kept us sane. And what we found over the years was that all of us were so worried about not contributing our fair share that we all would kind of overwork and try to do more than what we were supposed to do. So it worked. But if it hadn't, we would have talked about it. The trickier conversations, honestly, were around retirement time, when people started losing energy and losing focus and losing attention, and then it becomes sensitive. But we had those same conversations saying, hey, you know, it looks like your head's not here, your heart's not here, and so you ought to go to half salary. And the beauty was we're able to have those conversations and cut somebody's salary in half so that everybody felt like it was good, and it worked. Yeah, 30 years.
Yeah, so I noticed when you were sharing like your progress every year, like the money, there was 2 years in particular, I think it was 2014 and 15, where you made almost no income increase at all. And then the year right after, it was like a ton. It was a lot.
Are you
more.
in accounting? Are you an accountant?
No, marketing. But
Think about accounting. You might want to switch.
Well, I was wondering, what did you do during that time to change just how much you made?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the company was still fabulously profitable, but not growing, as you point out. What we found, and this is why it's so important to be able to have crucial conversations along the way, we had a sales model that was very marketing oriented. We generated tens of thousands of leads every year, so we developed a sales model where the salespeople would just kind of take these inbound leads and never do a lot of outbound prospecting. And we had kind of met the threshold of that model. We'd mined it for all it was worth, and it flattened out. So we started to have conversations to say, how do we get an outbound effort? How do we build that capacity in the organization? It was a new problem we had to solve 25 years into it.
The number one thing is just thank you for your wisdom today. Really appreciate it. But the other thing is, if you could give us maybe one tip that we could use to apply in our personal or professional, I feel like they would relate, our personal lives from crucial conversations or from just the wisdom that you've accumulated through consulting, what would that be?
Oh, that's an easy one for me. To me, the master skill of life is the capacity to understand and change your own emotions. That's the master skill. It determines my ability to persevere when things get tough, to stay motivated. It helps me to deal with relationship struggles when they inevitably occur. It helps me to build an organization without my own fears and junk getting in the way of it. So your ability to understand, why do I feel this way and how can I modulate and change my own emotions, that is the master skill. And it's in Chapter 8 of Crucial Conversations, available at a bookstore near you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to first ask what made you good to great? And it sounds like that might have been part of it, but my second part of the question is, how did you find your passion in life, and what would you advise us to do to help us find that passion and then find a profit and income on that?
So I'll answer the passion question. For me, everybody's got a different path, so I don't know how everybody does it, but I'll just tell you one thing that's been important for me. The one thing that I will take credit for having been good at, that I think has been an enormous blessing in my life, is that I get taps on the shoulders occasionally. And I think you do too. Some of those taps on the shoulders are people saying, you ought to read this article. And I'll feel something when they say it. I'll think, yeah, that's intriguing. Or someone will say, this is a book that I think is probably going to be important for you. And I'll feel something when they tell me the title of that book. Or they'll say, this is a person that you really ought to meet and connect with. And I'll feel something. You get those taps on the shoulder. But many of us forget them. We don't follow up. I've tried to be really good at pursuing those. When you have a sense about something, that life is beckoning to you, that you're being prompted to go a particular direction, honoring those every single time, putting the effort in to follow up on that, I think that's when the doors open and that's when the magic starts to happen. And that's certainly been the case in my life.
Joseph, you've mentioned how important relationships are to you. So my question to you is, did you and your colleagues work another career while starting this company? And if so, how did that impact your families? How was the support from your wife? Was it good? Was it hard having a career or not during the startup of your business?
What, was it hard? Yeah, it was really hard. I had a really significant ecclesiastical job in my church. I was a bishop, for those of you that understand what that means. At the time that we started our company, we were fairly newly married and had 3 small children when we started the company. But we had all the stress associated with that. And so I had this splitting headache for about 3 years. I think we didn't even realize, probably until years later, some of the stress it probably put on our relationship and on the children to be traveling a lot. Our business model early on was selling time. We didn't have intellectual products to start with, so it was about going and doing consulting gigs lots of places around the world. And if I wasn't on the road, I wasn't earning money. So we're trying to pay for our house. We're trying to save for the future. We're trying to get economically secure. And the best way to do that is to be gone all the time. Yeah, it was hard. And the most important conversation that Carrie Allen, Ron, and I had was, how are we going to hold each other accountable to setting boundaries on that? In retrospect, I think we didn't set aggressive enough boundaries, but we did set boundaries. And when one or the other of us would exceed that boundary, we would hold them accountable. So I think we just should have done it better. Yeah, good question.
Okay. Thanks, Joseph.